Welcome to footballgameplan.com, where football makes sense. I'm Emery Hunt, the czar of the playbook, and this is our countdown of the greatest college football teams of all time. Right now we're going to focus on 11 through 20, so let's take a look at the number 20th team we have rated as one of the greatest of all time.
The 1955 Grambling Tigers.
It's hard to believe that Grambling's 1955 team was the best in school history. 10-0 season, Black College National Championship, future Hall of Famer Willie Davis on that roster, and led a suffocating defense that dominated opponents. They outscored those guys 356-61. So 55 was a great year, not only for Eddie Robertson, but for the Grambling State Tigers.
Only two teams finished 1955 undefeated. It was Grambling and Oklahoma. That would have been an outstanding matchup between two powerhouse teams at the time. And you look at that defense, 4 defensive shutouts, and only gave up double-digit points once. And that was to FAMU in the Orange Blossom Classic. And remember, FAMU had an outstanding tailback by the name of Willie Gallimore. So Eddie Robertson went on to win 9 Black College National Championships en route to racking up over 400 victories, making him the winningest coach in college football history.
The 1940 Minnesota Golden Gophers.
People fail to realize that at one point in time, the Minnesota Golden Gophers was a football power. You talk about 5 national championships in 8 years, from 34 to 41. But this 1940 team had the best running back combination in the country with George Frank and the future Heisman Trophy winner, Bruce Smith.
The Gophers won 5 national championships in 8 years under head coach Bernie Bierman, and this team was probably his best one of the bunch because of their relative youth and the strength of schedule. These guys had to go on the road and knock off Ohio State and Northwestern, and they beat Michigan 7-6. That was a great game right there. And you look at that defense, very dominant. These guys held opponents to a grand total of 8 points a game.
The 1984 BYU Cougars.
Man, when you think of going out there to Provo, Utah, playing against Lavelle Edwards in that West Coast offense, but quiet as kept, this BYU team from '84 was outstanding on defense.
When the Cougars took the field in 1984, they dominated. They both opened and closed the season with impressive victories versus national powers in Pitt and Michigan, respectively. And they were led by one of the best offensive lines in college football with Trevor Matich and Louis Wong. And that defense was nothing to sneeze at either, led by Kurt Govea and Sean Knight. This was a very talented ball club out there in Provo, Utah.
The 1986 Penn State Nittany Lions.
You couldn't find a more well-balanced championship team than that '86 Penn State Nittany Lion team. When you look at the backfield and you also look at their defense, they dominated on both sides of the line of scrimmage.
The Nittany Lions had a suffocating defense. They dominated both the number 2 team in the country in Miami and the number 1 team in Alabama with linebacker Shane Collin. These guys were really disruptive in that front 7. They held Syracuse, West Virginia, and Alabama without scoring a touchdown. Killer backfield with DJ Dozier, Tim Manoa, Blair Thomas, and an underrated and talented secondary led by Ray Isom and Duffy Cobbs.
The 2009 Alabama Crimson Tide.
I haven't seen a defense just completely take over a ball game like that '09 Bama squad. And Alabama has had some outstanding teams throughout their history. But when you look at this '09 Bama team under Nick Saban, this might be the best one yet.
The 09 Bama team was stacked with first and second round NFL talent. In addition to the Heisman Trophy winner in the backfield, Mark Ingram, what made this team special is that they were dominant in every aspect of the game, both offensively and defensively, and they also excelled on special teams.
The 1905 Chicago Maroons.
When you think about Big Ten football, you always omit the early parts of the Big Ten, and the University of Chicago was the biggest program in the country, coached by Amos Alonzo Stagg. That 1905 Chicago team quite possibly put together one of the more impressive seasons in college football history.
No one wanted to play the Chicago Maroons in 1905. They actually coined the phrase "monsters of the Midway" due to their dominating defense. The Maroons only gave up 5 points all year long, and that was against Indiana. And they were also able to dominate area rival Northwestern 32-0. And in their toughest test all season long, they had to get a late safety in order to knock off Michigan, who suffered their first loss in 5 years, 2-0.
The 2004 USC Trojans.
See, the thing with USC is that they were so dominant throughout the course of the 70s and in the 60s and even in the 30s, it's tough to pick one team. But this 04 team quite possibly could have obliterated anybody that was on that schedule. That was a talented bunch of guys out there in Los Angeles.
Defensively, this was one of the more talented teams in Trojan history. In particular, you look at their defensive line with Cedric Ellis, Sean Cody, Mike Patterson, Lawrence Jackson, Frosty Rucker, and Manuel Wright. All guys played or still currently are playing in the National Football League. The Trojans obliterated the Oklahoma Sooners in the BCS title game that year, 55-19. And oh, let's not forget, they also had two outstanding tailbacks in Reggie Bush and Lindell White.
The 1945 Army Black Knights.
When you have two Heisman Trophy winners in your backfield, how can you ever lose a ball game? And that's what you can say about Doc Blanchard and Glenn Davis for the Army Cadets.
Armed with two Heisman Trophy winning running backs, the Black Knights of the Hudson demolished all opponents that season that stood in their way. The Cadets posted 5 shutouts, blanking number 2 Notre Dame and number 6 Penn, on their way to their second consecutive national championship, outscoring opponents 412-46.
The 1976 Pitt Panthers.
Tony Dorsett ran like everybody wanted to run in their dreams. This guy was just so smooth and fluid. And now you have an explosive component in the backfield to go along with a dominating defense. No one was going to beat Pitt that year in 1976.
The country's bicentennial started out with a bang for the Pitt Panthers as they knocked off number 11 Notre Dame on the road 31-10. Heisman Trophy winning running back Tony Dorsett went over 1,900 yards, and defensively they shut down a red-hot Georgia team in the Sugar Bowl 27-3.
The 1966 Michigan State Spartans.
The 66 Michigan State team, armed with Bubba Smith. You may know him as Hightower from the Police Academy movies, but at one point in time, Bubba Smith was one of the best defensive players in the country. And this was one of the best teams in the country, also with Gene Washington at wide receiver.
That 66 Michigan State team had 4 first-round picks on the roster, all of which went in the top 10 in the 1967 draft. You look at defensive end Bubba Smith, running back Clinton Jones, linebacker George Webster, and wide receiver Gene Washington. This team proved this mettle during a 3-game stretch versus ranked opponents like Michigan, Ohio State, and Purdue. A 10-10 tie in the game of the century versus Notre Dame, which was the last game of the season, is what kept these guys from winning the unanimous title in '66.